Okay, welcome everyone to No Ordinary Life event. Welcome everyone to our No Ordinary Life event. Today is World Mental Health Day, and we're having an event themed on mental health and work. So, thank you all for joining. Hello, Christine. Thank you for joining. I can see you all joining from YouTube. We should have a few people joining from LinkedIn as well, and also via Facebook. This is streaming on three platforms: Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. So thank you all so much for joining. Um, we're not going to waste too much time because we're hoping that we can finish this event by 8:30 UK time. So it should be an hour and a half, and we're looking forward to this conversation because it's very, very worth it. And if you're joining us for the very first time, I'm going to introduce what No Ordinary Life is, and then also introduce our panelists for today. So thank you for joining. Thank you so much for joining. And I guess we'll get started. So if you just joined us, please introduce yourself in the chat. Introduce yourself in the chat. So I can see Christine's joined us. Please say hello and let us know where you're joining us from, which country you're joining us from. We know that we are international, and today is World Mental Health Day. So we're expecting people from all over the world to join us. So today is World Mental Health Day, and No Ordinary Life as a career motivation platform, we find it very important to celebrate or to observe this day because mental health is very, very important, not just for people but also for our employers, our workplaces. Our entire well-being depends on how good our mental health is. So we're hoping that by the end of this event, whatever you are or whatever stage you are in your career, you are able to take home some very important tools to be able to cope with your mental health better. And very shortly, I'm going to be introducing our panelists. And before we get started, hello from the UK, and hello Akil Ali from the UK as well. Thank you for joining us. And Golda from Canada. Oh wow, thank you so much for joining, Golda. And these are all people I know. So thank you so much for coming to support. And I'm very, very sure that our panelists will also have people here as well who come to support them. So thank you for joining. And yeah, let's get into it. So, what is No Ordinary Life? No Ordinary Life is a career motivation platform, and our aim is to inspire people to achieve their dreams and their goals, whether it be professionally, mentally, whatever it is, we want them to be able to achieve their goals. So, we find it very useful and needful to talk about mental health because we are a Christian based organization and we believe in what the Bible says that as a man thinketh, so is he. So we think it's very, very important that whatever you think about in your head or whatever you aspire to be usually starts from your mind, right? So we want to make sure that our mental health is as strong and as sound as it can be so that we're able to push through in life, be as resilient as we can be to be able to achieve our goals and our dreams and be the people that we aspire to be. So that is No Ordinary Life. And thank you for joining. So without further ado, I will let our panelists introduce themselves. So first we have Mavis. Mavis, tell us your name and what you do in terms of your job or your career.
Right. I'm Mavis. Nice to meet you all and people around the world listening to our talk today. So, I help people define their core values in order to build purposeful and fulfilling careers. And recently, I've also started incorporating therapeutic arts and creative interventions into my practice that help them become more aware and remove their mental roadblocks to success.
Thank you very much, Mavis. Thank you for
Thank you so much.
joining. Next, we have Natalie. Welcome,
Hi
Natalie.
everyone. Hello, hi everyone. Greetings to everybody who's joined us. Yeah, I'm from the UK and I just help job seekers with career choices and coaching them through their mental health barriers. And I also do one-to-one coaching, just general life coaching as well.
Thank you very much, Natalie. Thank you for joining. And finally, we have our final panelist, Jean. Welcome, Jean. If you may introduce yourself, please.
Thank you. Hi. Yes, my name is Jane. So I'm a HR consultant by profession, but I work as a HR business partner for one of the global organizations. As a business partner, basically, I partner with senior leaders on their strategic plans on how to manage their business through their people. So I'm very passionate about mental health, and I'm also actually a board of trustee for No Ordinary Life. So really happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. And thank you all. Thank our panelists. And thank you as well, our guests, for joining today's event. Yes, so No Ordinary Life is hosting this event, especially from World Mental Health Day. Today is World Mental Health Day. And we're not just going to do this just for mental health. As often as we can, we do actually post inspirational posts regarding mental health. So do follow our pages on social media. We are on Instagram, on LinkedIn, on Twitter, on Facebook. Not yet on TikTok, but maybe at some point we will be on TikTok. So yes, thank you for joining. And I can see we have a few more people joining us. Hello, Daniel from Ghana. Thank you for joining us, and Josephine as well from Kenya. Thank you so much for joining us. So as you said, World Mental Health Day, people from all over the world, thank you for joining. And if you've just joined, this is going to be a live talk. So our guests will be asked a few questions, but you also have the chance as well to also ask questions as well. So if the conversation is, you pick out some things from the conversation that you feel you want to ask a question about, feel free to just type it in the chat, or you can wait till the Q&A section and then ask your question. So there's going to be about 40-minute talk, and then there's going to be a Q&A afterwards. So do drop your questions in the chat if you can't hold on to them until the Q&A section. So thank you for joining. So our very first question is to all the panelists, but I'll start with Mavis. We're talking about mental health and work. Work regarding if you're self-employed, you're job seeking, you are an employer, whatever you are in the phase of career, we want to really build up our resilience and also understand why mental health is important. For yourself, Mavis, do you think that there's enough being done regarding mental health in the workplace from your experience?
Right, okay. So it's such a great day to talk about mental health on Mental Health Day, right? So before I share some insight, I just want to reveal some statistics you might have heard before. So according to the State of Global Workplace report this year, only 21% of employees are engaged at work. 33% of employees are thriving in their overall well-being. And so what does that even mean? And unfortunately, it doesn't seem like workplaces are very effective at managing mental health all the time. And from my own experience so far, I would say charities, nonprofit organizations, or educational providers are probably more effective at this. But I'm sure that all of the industries are well aware of it. And we start to see the rise of 4.5-day work week, work from home options, where companies often use this as an incentive to attract talents. And well, let's say thanks to COVID, because people start to take actions like this to improve work-life balance, mental health, realizing what their ideal lifestyle is, because COVID certainly opened up this opportunity for us to consider the possibility of increasing flexibility in when and where you work. So now we can have online meetings, seminars, and talks like this. As I remember a few years ago, people are still pretty reluctant to work and meet online. And it wasn't until this happened that we viewed it as a sign for change and to adapt to a new lifestyle that hopefully benefits the workforce and people who has been struggling to claim their power and take care of their well-being at work. And even though a lot of charities and nonprofit initiatives like NOL are raising awareness and making great positive impacts to help improving workplace well-being, and the truth is, no one is responsible for mental health, right? So I'm here today to bring this important message I have for all of you, to empower you wherever you go and whatever you do, to shape a mental health friendly workplace for yourself and enhance your inner experience instead of relying on the external world or support when they are not always useful. And I will go deeper and dive deeper on it later on. Thank you.
Thank you, Mavis. Okay. So, Natalie, same question goes to you. Do you think that the workplace is effective at tackling or managing mental health?
I would say yes. I would say, like Mavis, much depends on the industry. Some industries are a little bit slower to come around to accommodating staff flexibility, needing that time off, or, factoring in mental health in the workplace. So, I mean, I've worked in corporate life, and sometimes it isn't always possible. Sometimes it's down to business needs, whether you can have, that time out, or whether it's even acknowledged that you need that time out. But yes, things are changing. It is being managed more effectively now, and HR is, actually, at the point of onboarding new talent, they're actually talking about it and getting coaches in. Definitely, I've seen that shift. Definitely. I mean, even in recruitment, which was in the past quite a hard-nosed environment, they're even talking about mental health now, and having coaches in the workplace, mental first aiders on the floor, walking up and down, if anyone needs to talk. So yeah, it is definitely improving for the better, I would say.
Okay, thank you for sharing that. And I can see that there's definitely similarities between what you said and what Mavis said. It's improving. So thank goodness for that. Jean, as a HR consultant, do you feel like the workplace is effective at managing mental health?
Thank you. Yes, I would want to agree with Natalie and Mavis. To be fair, we've come a long way. I think we're not there yet, but I think there's some improvement, put it that way. Where years ago, so I've worked in HR for about 25 years, it used to be almost a taboo to talk about mental health. People were just shying away, even just disclosing that they're struggling with mental health. But where we are now is becoming the norm. So people are they're recognizing that actually mental health is as important as it is the physical health. So more employees are able to come forward and talk to their managers. So it's really good to see. But also, like Natalie was saying, we've now got mental health champions walking around the building, supporting colleagues. We've got the EAP, which is the Employee Assistance Program. We've got various signposting happening in various businesses. So it's a good thing to see. But we've still got some improvement to make, I think. We're not there yet.
Thank you very much for sharing that. And just kind of bouncing back on what you mentioned about improvements being done. It's really great to see that there are mental health champions being raised in the workplace. And I feel like HR is actually, there's a lot of training going on within HR to help people when it comes to mental health and really managing their mental health. So you'll give us an insight into what kind of training you've been through as a HR consultant. But 3 very common mental health issues that we usually hear about are stress, depression, and anxiety. And these are the areas that I would say most workplaces, everyone pretty much experiences in their journey or in their career. So for yourself, Mavis, as a mental health therapist, can you give us an insight into what depression is and what causes depression, especially within the workplace? And then you can talk about anxiety as well, and then stress, and then all the panelists can chip in as well. But I'm starting with you, Mavis.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Claudia. You definitely hit on depression and anxiety, 2 of the most common mental health difficulties that people face at work and personal lives. So I guess depression, people should be quite familiar with this term because it's categorized by persistent and prolonged feelings of sadness, guilt, and often it's very hard to explain. And people who are suffering from depression might isolate themselves, worry excessively about getting work done, and feeling guilty about letting people down. And so at work, depression causes lack of motivation and focus, obviously, low energy to do things. And they can find it very difficult to talk about their emotions and how they feel at work because they feel ashamed that they might be judged. And so the feelings of hopelessness may amplify if they don't take active action to help themselves or seek help from other people. So when feeling low or anxious, I would recommend when you're struggling to complete your workload, I recommend you to talk things through with someone you trust, obviously, and try to understand what triggered the symptoms so that you can prevent that from happening again by setting boundaries, taking breaks, checking in with yourself regularly, or disclose to coworkers or manager when necessary, and if they can provide support to you in any way. And expand your comfort zone by taking small bites at a time when trying to complete a huge task that seems very overwhelming. And in terms of anxiety, I would like to touch on social anxiety and stress-related anxiety. Social anxiety means that you have experienced inability to network effectively, you have fear of attending business social events, encountering any problems, developing relationships with coworkers, lack of self-confidence, or difficulty speaking up in meetings. And so we need to make a distinction between shyness and social anxiety. While shyness is not the same as social anxiety, the ideas to help shy people adapt to those business world may also be useful for helping managing social anxiety in the workplace. For example, in preparation for a job interview, you might try to do some mock interview practice with someone who you're comfortable with, or recording it yourself. And training on social skills, master's class, reading books, resources, or debriefing, and try to embed these little training daily. Engage in small, brief talks with coworkers to, again, expand your comfort zone and hone your communication and interpersonal skills. And gradually, you will become more comfortable in these situations. And just find a way that you're comfortable with and that stretches you a little bit at the same time would really help. And lastly, stress-related anxiety or anxiety in general. So it's very normal to feel nervous before a presentation or meeting. But if you experience constant or extreme worrying, crying, feeling tired, tense, or irritable, these symptoms can cause low productivity, not engaging, or even missing work days. And they are often caused by extra long working hours, high stress, lack of support from managers or coworkers that can lead you from developing anxiety at work. And so I've mentioned quite a lot of tips and self-help strategies to protect yourself at work. And I would really encourage you to seek help if you don't have the capacity to help yourself anymore. And please don't be ashamed about it. And ways you can seek support at work might be reaching out to your supervisor and human resource department, as Jean has mentioned, that they might have an employee well-being program, or alternatively seeking treatment through a therapist or psychologist. And please remember that you're never alone in this journey. There's always someone here to help and listen as long as you're open to that.
Okay, thank you very much for sharing that. Very, very helpful tips for people who are going through social anxiety and depression as well. And I'm just going to take a comment from the comment section from Josephine from Kenya. She says she loves the idea of mental health champions at the workplace. So if you're someone who is looking to have your own establishment, employ people, I would say definitely look into the idea of mental health champions because it's very, very important. Times are getting tough, so people don't just deal with their problems at home, they do take it into work as well, and that could affect their productivity. So very, very important to have mental health champions and make sure that it's very, very clear for people to know that they can actually speak to people or speak to HR, speak to the manager if they have problems at work or related to mental health, and not keep it to themselves. So Jean as well, is there anything you want to add regarding anxiety, depression, stress in the workplace, Jean?
Thank you. Yes, I want just to add a little bit around the social anxiety that Mavis was talking about. From my observation, we tend to find that when people are off work for a long time, they somehow develop this social anxiety for some reason. So the fear of speaking to people or interacting to people. So even when they're due to return to work, it becomes really challenging for them just to take a step forward and walk through that door. And so what we did from the organization that I work for, we then introduced like some coffee catch-ups. So where a line manager would meet a person that's been on long-term sick, as an example, just for a coffee. So they aren't going to work, but they will just turn up, have a coffee with their line manager, or they'll step in the office, just say hello to people, and then they'll go home. So they'll phase into work rather than just bang on, come into work and start working. So that really helps with people that are struggling with social anxiety, because indeed it's a real thing. Even people that have been on maternity leave do get it as well, because you've been off for a year. And that first day of returning into the office, seeing everybody that you've not seen for a year, it can be daunting to some people. So help them, bring them in for a day, let them just walk around, have a coffee, go home, and then slowly they can, come in and settle. I think it's important. But also stress is one of the highest reasons, according to statistics, as in why people struggle with mental health, is around the stress aspect. So stress can be caused by a number of reasons, and sometimes it's just as simple as workload. This is why it's necessary for line managers to keep an eye on their people, making sure that they've got enough, just enough to be able to cope with life itself, because life itself can be stressful anyway. And therefore, if it's too much, then that stress becomes something else. It builds up from good to not so good to poor. So yeah, just for line managers from the HR point of view, we tend to call out saying, keep an eye on your people, watch out on some changes, some anxiousness, some stress that can be, you can need to see that the person is drowning. It could be that you may look at their workload, you may look at the frequency of their rest breaks. So there's a number of things that you can do. But so yeah, really good points, Mavis, that's brought about. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Jean, and very good points from yourself as well. You gave some managers who are on here, line managers who are on here, some tips as well. So workload is very, very important. We want to make sure people are not stressed at work because it's a cycle. Stress, depression, anxiety, it's a cycle. Natalie.
Yes, definitely. Yes, talking to someone, knowing that you can have a chat and some time out is important. I also would say, I would find it helpful when I've found it. I was working in one corporate company, and what they would do is we would have discussions like just casual discussions, or we'd have like team days where you could get talking to someone to get over the social anxiety on your pod, and we'd just work in pods and prepare for something together. So you'd have a common goal and you'd decorate the pod or something, and then you'd get talking to other people. And that I found that really helpful as well. And also, I say to people that I coach who may have been out of work for a long time, may have social anxiety and, be apprehensive about returning. To those people, I say as well, I kind of break the day down into small blocks with them, and we look at their morning routine, things like that. And if they can get some quiet time in the morning, and also acknowledge, I'm an introvert myself, and I found it helpful to acknowledge, yes, I am an introvert and I need to have that quiet time in the morning to reset myself, to prepare myself now to go and meet people. And when I build up myself inside before I go into the workplace, it really helps. And I've found with my coaching clients that, we get a good morning routine as well, and it really just calms them down before they go in as well. They're not feeling like they've been rushing straight into work and having to sort out themselves. So we kind of look at every aspect of the day. What does a working day look like? And just dealing with every facet of organizing yourself to work. So then
Wow.
that they arrive a bit calmer, and a lot of my clients are saying it's actually helping them to take the day
Wow.
into their stride, a bit better.
Wow. So it all starts from how you start, basically. So it's very important, as Natalie's mentioned, is how you start determines how you're going to finish. Very, 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 very true. Thank you for sharing that. Hopefully, you get to share it again later on for people who came later or at some point in the middle of your answer. So keep that and share it again. Some comments here as well. Welcome, Baba from Ghana as well. And thank you, Christine, for sharing on your Instagram and WhatsApp. And there's a question here. I'm going to read the question. So she says, how do you ensure you have healthy mental health when your superiors arouse stress and anxiety in you? Wow. How do you ensure you have healthy mental health when your superiors arouse stress and anxiety in you? Who should I go for this one for? I will go for Jean. How do you ensure you have healthy mental health when your superiors arouse stress and anxiety in you? Thank you for that question, Amnatu.
Yeah, thank you. And that's a real thing, actually. It does happen to quite a number of colleagues in the workplace. All I would say is, first of all, you need to build that confidence and speak to them, first of all, if you can, because sometimes they may not even know that they're actually raising your anxiety. So until you approach them and say, look, whatever you're doing is raising my anxiety, be point blank with them. But if you're not feeling confident because they are your superior at the end of the day, you can't speak to someone else. I would like to believe that in a workplace, there's always people around. So you can even jump a stage, speak to their boss, jump your managers, go straight to the senior above them, but try and speak to someone. Or you can speak to your colleague and let them take it upon themselves either to resolve it or to go and speak to that manager that's causing you anxiety. What you cannot do is not to speak up about it, because they may not change. So if you don't say it, they will just carry on behaving that way, and it will just carry on affecting you. So please, if there's one thing that you can do, is to speak up. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jean. Very, very important. And I suppose kind of a follow-up to that as well is, in some cultures, it feels, how do I say, it feels almost impossible or rude to actually speak in a way, I won't say, to speak to a manager in that way. It feels like that you're telling them off if you were speaking to your manager and you're saying that you're causing me stress. It feels a bit rude. So in that way, there's other ways to go to the one above your manager, and hopefully, if HR are also in a position to take that up, they can take it up. So it's not you having to deal with the manager. Anything else to add to that, Jean? Where in a culture where it feels rude to speak to kind of confront your manager, what's the best solution for that? Yeah.
So there are different ways on how you can deal with it. Yes, you can speak to HR straight away, but also in some companies, we've got speak ups. So there's a number where you can raise concerns. anonymously if you wish, or you can put your name on it. There are various ways on how you can raise a concern without speaking to your manager directly. You can also rely on a colleague, bearing in mind we spend a lot of time at work. I'm sure there's got to be someone that you can trust in the workplace, and it's the healthy thing to do. Trust someone in the workplace, speak to them, let them take on the responsibility to raise it for you if you're not feeling confident to speak to that manager. But please do not speak up, speak up.
Wow. Thank you so much, Jean. Very important to speak up, because you don't want to lose you don't want your mental health to get worse, and also to lose your mental health completely and lose your job. So very important. Natalie, anything else to add to that? How do you ensure you have healthy mental health when you don't want to arouse your superiors?
Yes, I had this situation about 10 years ago now, and I felt reluctant to say something, but I got a buddy, a work colleague, to come into the meeting with me, with my line manager. She kindly came in and just sort of was moral support for me, and he didn't even realize that he was causing me that anxiety. So the three of, just having her there was helpful. And we just sat down and talked it out. And in the end, it was just a personality thing. I think sometimes it is a personality clash. But yes, like Jean said, I felt so much better saying something. It was a weight off my mind, because sometimes to be losing sleep, when you're anxious to go back to work the next day. And when we cleared it up, it was just such a relief. Yeah, such a relief. He had no clue he had that effect on me.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. That's a practicality of how to actually go about doing that. Mavis, anything else to add to that?
Right, so I'm sure you have contributed a lot of great ideas already, and great question. So I'm going to talk about maybe how to set boundaries and not let emotion lead the way. So if this happens to you, it's great to always take a deep breath, and also maybe go to a safe space for you to decompress and also process what has happened. And obviously, I know that it will be a very difficult way for you to do that, but always remind yourself, try to let yourself calm down before you tell others to speak up or tell others what the objective reality is. So, yeah.
For sharing that. So deep breath, making sure that you're taking it easy and not kind of making decisions based on how you feel. I know that's very, very difficult, because the mind and the emotions, they do act faster than we can control sometimes, but it's very, very important that we learn to control our emotions. And I suppose having someone that you can actually trust, maybe not even within the workplace, because sometimes we don't even trust our work colleagues, right? Having someone outside of the work that you can speak to, someone that you can vent to after work, had a stressful day at work, someone that you can speak to was very, very helpful. I have that sometimes, and that's my sister. And my sister will also, vent to me when she has, issues at work, and it doesn't go outside of the house, because we're able to manage it. And it also, having another perspective also helps to make decisions, which are, I'd say, wiser as well. So very important that we have a way that we're able to suppress our emotions, or at least keep them in control until we have a clear idea of what the next step is, right? Thank you for that. And you've actually mentioned a very, very good point for our next question. So my next question to all of you, I'll start with Natalie first, is what tools do you encourage people to use to cope with or to manage their mental health? So you are a career coach, so you work with people who are transitioning career, who are probably looking for a job, first time having a job, or whatever it is. What do you encourage them to do when they're in bad mental place because of maybe depression. They're not finding the job that they love. They're going for interviews, they're being turned down, or they're applying for jobs and there's nothing. They're feeling discouraged. What tools do you encourage people to use to stimulate, to boost their confidence, really?
Sometimes, yeah, it is just a case of getting them to, they're in a bad place, but getting them to just sort of think about, to write it out, just write down what's happened, everything that's happened, just get it out on paper, or they could speak to me or someone else that they trust. And then from there, sometimes it's to rebuild them. So if they're going for lots of job interviews and they're not getting anything, or they're getting frustrated, or they are not finding no enjoyment in anything, sometimes I say to them, just think about what you really enjoy doing. And then as a first step, look for some voluntary work. And sometimes it's a great way to get back, to get your confidence, cultivate that again, and get into some sort of routine that is productive. And it's also a step that's moving them towards what they may want to transition into. So I do things like that with them. We do active SWOT analysis, where they look at their strengths, their weaknesses. I ask them questions. I'll say, what would someone you love, what do you think someone you love would say is your strengths and weaknesses? Because sometimes they can't even, if they're in a really bad place, to think about it for themselves. So sometimes you have to look at it bring another perspective in and view it from how they think other people see them as well. And then they would write down, what would my best friend say was my strengths and the good things about me. And we just build the self-esteem that way through different sessions. And then, I use my contacts if I can get them into a position, doing something and getting them into meeting contacts. And sometimes it's not what they really want to do, but sometimes they've had so much knockbacks, they just don't want to be sitting around anymore, because that is also counterproductive as well. So sometimes the first step is just to, look at what they really love doing, get some voluntary work. And then from there, we would have another look at the CV and we start working on that and getting them back into paid work.
Okay, fantastic. So volunteering, writing down your thoughts, your feelings, and also SWOT analysis. I remember when I just come out of university and I was transitioning into a different career. My dad actually encouraged me to do a SWOT analysis. So that's been very, very helpful. And I always used to think I didn't have much to offer, but after doing the SWOT analysis, I was like, I'm super, I'm amazing.
Yeah.
And that really boosted my confidence. So it's not old-fashioned. It's not for just, it's not for organizations to do. It's actually a personal thing that people can actually do. So if you're out there and you're transitioning career, you're looking for a job, you're actually interviewing, it's a great way to get your, have idea how to be able to sell yourself. So do a SWOT analysis. It doesn't take much time, and once you get started, you'll be able to just come up with so many things. So very, very important. I'm taking that on, SWOT analysis. Okay. And Jean, for yourself as well, what do you encourage people to do to cope with their mental health? So for someone who's a consultant, a HR consultant, what do you encourage people to do when they're in the workplace and they come to you with their problems?
So in the workplace, there's a number of things that we tend to look at. So first of all, we'll do a risk assessment with that person. In that risk assessment, it will talk through what are the triggers, first of all. And if they're happy to share, we'll go through them and making sure, Mervis spoke about this area as well, making sure that they are avoiding those triggers. And also the top line is making sure we understand what is it that do they enjoy doing. Again, Natalie has emphasized on that. That is very important, because a lot of times each one of us has specific things that we like to do. And that's the safest place for people to start off refocusing their mind on something else. So I've had some managers, for example, there was one manager that said, well, I love golf. So I said, well, why don't you go back and do golf? She said, well, I've not played golf for over 15 years. It doesn't matter. And then he went, the first day, he was very anxious. He just went and just walked through and then re-registered the membership, and then he started playing. That was the way out, completely changed his life, and he completely got better, mental health gone. He was back to normal, back to his normal good health. So really important to understand what is it that ticks in you. Is there something that you enjoy to do? There are some people that like reading, and then we recommend that why don't you register at the library, for example, so every Saturday you can go and read your book. There are people that love the gym. Why don't you, go to the gym maybe 3 times a week? Eventually, it does help. But we also recommend the GP. It's one thing that gets forgotten sometimes. Whilst we're sat in the workplace, we're not doctors. We're not fully trained to be able to guide people with mental health. So first of all, we try and call out, have you spoken to your GP? It's really important because GP are trained to support people with mental health as well. We also speak about families. Do you have a family at home? Do you have anybody that you can trust? I know you spoke about your own sister, Claudia, as an example. We tend to do that as well, patient, our colleagues saying, is there someone at home that you can trust and speak to them about what you're going through? And so there's small steps that we take, personalize the conversation, and does help because there's no one size fits all when it comes to mental health. It all depends on what the person is all about. What do they like to do? What's the home environment like? What's their sake of trust around their life? And all sorts of things, really. So yeah, in brief, that's what we tend to do. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing that, Jean. For those of you who are joining from other countries, Jean mentioned a GP. So GP is a general practitioner, and that is basically your, I won't say a personal doctor, let's just say. It's a doctor that you're registered with. So it's a clinic, a small clinic that you have, and your GP is the doctor of that clinic that you're registered with. So that's something for you. So checking up on your health is very, very important. And I love the fact that you gave an example of the guy who you encouraged to go back to doing golfing. And I think it's very, very important that we do actually have a good work-life balance, because I think that sometimes people get into a place where they just work. It's all about targets and goals, and they don't have a life outside of work. So once things begin to crumble at work, they feel like their whole life is messed up because they don't have anything sustaining them outside of the workplace. So it's very important, as you mentioned, looking at your family, looking at what you love to do. And Natalie also mentioned that as well, and Mavis also mentioned that as well. So making sure that you're doing what you love to do. And these days, there are other things like mindfulness. I'm sure Mavis will talk about it. Mindfulness, art, so many things. Being out in nature also helps as well. Just taking some fresh air. These are very, very little things that we don't consider how important they are, but they are very, very helpful. So I would also say write down a list of things that make you feel good. Like Maria in Sound of Music will say, these are a few of my favorite things. So have a list of favorite things that you have, and then when things get tough, go back to your favorite things and begin to fall back on them so that they can actually help you through your difficult times. Very, very important. And family is important. Mavis, anything to add to that?
Yeah, for sure. So you mentioned quite a lot of great points, and obviously engaging in things that you really enjoy. And so there's no one size fit all answer to this. And hopefully my answer will also touch on Christine's question. So there's just so many methods, and as simple as having a balanced lifestyle and diet, different strategies you have to see online. And so what I often do in my mental health workshops is using simple CPT techniques. So it sounds really fancy, but they are really easy and you can do it within minutes, like the stress bucket, where you see what's on your plate and see if it's overflowing. Social mapping to identify any support systems, people around you that you can reach out to. Noticing your red flags, or balance exercise, which is like a scale, and then you need to put the stressors on the right hand side, and then restorative activities on the left hand side, and see if they match the balance. So these are some ways that you can check in with yourself, and also fun activities that you may use it in the workplace. So I'm happy to share more if you are interested. Yeah, I just want you to all be very aware that there's just so many ways, and what works for you might not be the same for others.
Mavis. Okay, so we have another question in the chat. Christine, we'll take your question as well. I guess towards the end. But for now, we'll take Baba's question. Baba's question. He says, "What is your opinion on caring tales at the workplace? What do you do if your departmental boss always runs programs that has to do with money and so subordinate for work without money or incentive?" So caring tales at the workplace. I'm not quite sure what that refers to. But I'll take the second part that says, "What do you do if your departmental boss is always running programs that has to do with money and so subordinates work without money or incentive?" Okay, so I guess he's trying to say that if there's a high workload and maybe there's no incentive regarding maybe a bonus after you've completed a task, there's nothing like that. So how do you kind of mention to your boss that it would be good to have some incentives to to boost what we're doing? Who shall we go for to this for? Shall I go for Natalie? I'll go for you. How would you deal with that? How do you approach your boss, and when you feel like you need an incentive, you're running low on energy, you need some motivation?
Yeah, I mean, I would in the past I've always just just called them aside and asked to speak to them, and just sort of talk about the amount of work that I'm doing, and if there's any chance of being remunerated, extra money or some other incentive. It might be time off. I usually look at what I need at that moment in time. So if it's that time off that would motivate me at the end, I can take some block time off, then that's what I'd ask for. If it's that I'd want to be paid a pay rise because I'm actually, doing more work or doing extra duties, then I'll ask for that. Yeah. But I just think it's I would just always speak to my line manager in my department, and just reiterate to them what I'm doing and the effort that I'm putting in as well. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. I suppose appraisals is a good chance to actually mention that progress and appraisals. I hope it's still something that employers do, having appraisals with their employees. I hope
And
it's
I would
something.
say write things down as well. Keep a diary as well of what you're doing, what you're contributing to the department. And all the good things you've done throughout the year, so that when it comes down to those conversations, you can say, look, I've done this, I've done that, come up with that idea, this thing,
Yeah, very, very true. Thank you for sharing that. And it's also very helpful for when you're attending interviews as well, where you have to talk about a time when you achieved this and did that.
Right.
Yeah. So very helpful. Write down your achievements and how or even challenges that you've overcome as well. Very helpful. Thank you for sharing that, Natalie. Jean, just one extra addition, and then we'll take Christine's point. But before you do that, we are ready to take your questions. So Q&A session is now open. So please put your questions in the chat. Jean is going to answer this question, and then please share your questions in the chat. Thank you. Jean.
So just to add on to what Natalie was talking about, so here in the UK, I mean, no one should be working without getting paid, basically. So from what he's saying, it looks like he's referring to doing certain things without an incentive or without overtime. All I would say is, again, to the previous point that we discussed earlier, anything that you're not happy about, go and speak to your line manager. And if you can't, find a colleague or put it in writing, like Natalie was saying. You can actually submit a complaint, if you like, or a grievance, if you like. If you're not, you've tried to speak to your manager and they're not listening, put it in writing, state your points and how you want it to be resolved. So in this scenario, it looks like this is someone that's been doing work without actually being rewarded for it. So it's worth having a conversation with your manager, or ask a friend or ask a colleague to do it for you if you are not feeling confident to approach your manager by yourself. And that's all I would say, I think, on that one. Thank you.
Thank you, Jean. So I have a question, a follow-up question for you, Jean, and this might seem a bit odd, but I think it's something that I think maybe a few people are thinking about. What is the role of HR? What does the HR department do, apart from helping with the onboarding and recruitment of people? Once that's done, what does the HR department do? I know they also help when, they're also there when people are leaving the workplace, but what does the HR department do? This is for people who have the same question as I do. I don't know what HR does sometimes.
Okay, that's a big question, actually, but
Yeah.
I will try and answer it in simple terms. So basically, the HR team manages the employee life cycle, apart from finding them, first of all. So we recruit, and then once they're in the organization, it's about managing their life in the organization, and that involves a lot. It may be something to do with pay, so you get involved in pay conversations, you get involved on assessing what's the actual correct pay that those individuals should be paid based on their job description. And then within that life cycle, there are also grievances that maybe that can arise. So either the colleague is not happy, they raise a complaint against their manager. HR is there to help resolve those grievances, but also HR is there to manage company policies. And there are so many policies within an organization. And so they're there to monitor or police those policies, making sure that managers are following them. As a HR department, we also look at training. So the training needs analysis. You carry out an analysis on what training should we provide to our people? What are they lacking? We also look at the reward in terms of bonuses, so people are working, you review them through their annual appraisals. Those that are going above and beyond, what do we do with those people to make sure that we're rewarding the work that they've put in? We also look at attrition, so people leaving and people employing. Why are people leaving? We also look at long-term sickness or any absences. So if you've got too many people off sick, you're looking at the reasons why. Why are so many people off sick? What's causing it? There's just too many things that we look at. So it's about keeping people happy and content with what they're doing. So to make sure that they're happy in the workplace, they're enjoying working in that business, and making sure that you're not losing them. So it's about the whole thing, the whole life cycle of finding people and keeping them in an organization, but above all, making sure that that business is making money or making a profit, if it's a profit-making organization. So I hope I've answered it all, but it's just from start to finish. There's so much that happens in between as well. I haven't even spoken about restructuring, because sometimes you may find yourself having employed too many people. So then you look at how do we exit some of those people and just keep a few to make sure that the organization is running and making a profit. So yeah, we are there as an independent body for the business and for the people as well. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much for sharing that. I feel so much more knowledgeable about what HR does, because I definitely hear of HR towards the start and towards the end when you're leaving. So it's good that HR is involved in the entire cycle. And actually, this is something that we could probably have another event about. But also, I guess that's where mental health comes in, because there's some companies, organizations, which are too small to actually have a HR department. So people who are not necessarily excessively trained in HR end up taking up these roles, and sometimes they might not necessarily know how to handle these issues to do with how to actually manage human resources. So that's probably where mental health. Some deficits in mental health do come in when the HR department, or there is no HR department, and they're not able to do the job as fully as they can do, because it's too much, really. And so, since I've talked about yourself, Jean, I think I'm going to go to Mavis. Mavis is a mental health therapist. What does a mental health therapist do? So, in terms of what we're talking about today, what can someone like you do to help someone who is in a going through mental health issues? But what does a mental health therapist do?
Right. So actually, I'm still not a qualified therapist yet. So I'm working just as a mental health facilitator. And what I do at work is I hold workshops or one-to-one sections to engage in those CBT techniques that I've mentioned about, to empower people to take care of their mental health and see what works for them. And so I've also mentioned that I'm doing life coaching and also facilitating therapeutic arts in my own programs. So it's a slightly different approach where I work with them one-on-one in a personalized plan to see how creativity can lead them and how they can express their emotional needs or any subconscious beliefs that weren't brought to awareness that might potentially block their way to success, their way to great well-being.
Thank you very much for sharing that. And very soon we'll talk about what a career coach does, Natalie. So get ready. But there's a question in the chat. I think we can tackle that question first. This is from Daniel, and he says, "How can the general public be made to understand, accept, and treat people with mental health issues just like people with physical health conditions, as stigma has been a general threat in the management of mental health?" Wow. Wow, that's very, very loaded. That's very loaded. That's very loaded. That's a very good question, Daniel. Thank you for asking that question. Uh, Mavis,
Yes.
would you like to answer this question?
Sure. This is such a big question, Daniel. I love that you've asked it. So whenever we have any mental health workshops, any talks about mental health, we often bring up the word stigma. And it's such a big term because it has some type of negative associations to mental health. So I guess what we are trying to do moving forward, try to use words that elicit any positive or neutral emotions. Like when we talk about mental health difficulties, we try not to use difficulties. And I often try to reframe the word or phrase into well-being. So I try to avoid these type of words that might make people feel isolated or make them feel like there's a negative label. And we try to make it more inclusive and a better environment that is more encouraging for people to open up and tell us about what's going on in their lives.
Very much. So making sure that the words that we use, terminology that we use, is respectable. so that people do not get upset, because at the end of the day, I'm going to add to that, to something I learned at school, as a teacher. We were talking about mental health awareness, and it's the fact that everyone actually has mental health. So everyone has mental health, and it's a spectrum. You can have, it goes from good mental health to bad mental health, and everyone goes through that spectrum. So as an individual, you can have times when you have good mental health, and you can have times when you have bad mental health, because you have times when you're sad, you're happy, you're depressed. There are challenges in life, and they cause you to move through this spectrum of good and bad. So people are not different when they're in a period where they're having a bad mental health period. It's completely normal, and it just shows that they're going through certain challenges, but they will eventually get out of those challenges, just like yourself, as an individual, will go through challenges. So it's completely normal that we all have mental health, and it goes through good and bad phases. So I'm very, very open about sharing my mental health experiences, and I'm very open about sharing the fact that I did go through a long period of depression for about 14 years of my life. So it's completely normal, and it just shows, it's a phase that you can develop out of, as well. It's just about finding people who understand you, and having the right tools to actually get through that phase, and also come to the other side, of the spectrum, to a better place. We all go through it. Is there anyone else that wants to share? I'll go for Jean. Do you want to add anything to that?
Thank you. You've summarized quite well, actually. I like the wording that you were using. It's indeed, everyone has mental health in the same way as physical health. And I think for the general public, all we can do is to talk more about mental health, to normalize it, because it's just health. It's as important as physical health. It's as real as physical health. And therefore, to remove that stigma, I think the more we talk about it, like we're doing today, so we're talking in different platforms on social media, the more people can do that, the more it will become as normal, because it is normal, it's part of us, and therefore we need to be sharing it more and sharing ideas on how we can tackle it, basically. So yeah, good point, Claudia, nothing more to add. Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing, Nick, Mavis, Jean. Natalie, if you have anything else to add to that?
No, I would say, yeah, that's very much the case. Yeah, definitely. I feel that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. There's also another, I think Baba also had another, he was trying to clarify the question he asked. So he said the first question was about people backbiting each other at the workplace. And the second was referring to when your boss is himself or herself is hijacking all the work that comes from initiative other than the normal payroll and allowance, and work that has no incentive for subordinates. It is very frustrating. What should one do in this kind of environment in both scenarios? So I'll take the first question again. It's about people, your work colleagues, basically backbiting each other or betraying each other.
Mm-hmm.
So the first part, what can you do about it? So let's take the first part. Natalie, do you want to take that question?
Oh yes, that is something I've experienced, but I try not to get involved with gossip and stuff like that, because things can get distorted and so on. And I would just try to stay with the issue at hand, you know. So with the general gossip and things like that, I just generally would advise my clients not to get involved as far as possible. If it's stuff that's been said about them, and it's hurtful, then maybe it might be worth asking the person who's gossiping, if they feel able to approach them and ask them what it is that is so that they have to be saying these things. yeah. So with gossip, I just don't get involved, and people do try and draw you in, but I don't. I would say I usually just say that person isn't here to defend themselves. I don't want to start talking about them, and they're not here to defend themselves. And I say to the person, if you have a problem with them, why don't you call them aside and speak to them directly instead of telling me? Is that, you know, it's not helping, or, you know, spreading it around. Just call the person aside themselves if you don't think they're pulling their weight. It's usually around that kind of thing. Oh, I don't think so and so works as hard as we do, sort of thing. But I just try not to get involved if they're not here to defend themselves.
Yeah.
And then if it gets to the point where it's getting toxic, it's best to bring in a line manager, you know, because from the managerial point of view, they should be able to call everybody in and get to the bottom of what's going on, you know, in the meeting, just sit down and, or just have that opportunity to discuss what's going on, you know. Yeah, if it's affecting productivity as well, then the management involved.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. So in essence, the first step is to not get involved. The first step, not get involved. Try and just pull yourself out of that situation, not get involved. And Jean, you wanted to add something as well.
Yes, I wanted to mention that gossiping can actually be bullying here in the UK. So it's quite serious. And in the organization I work for example, we take it seriously. It can be the cause of people's stress and mental health as well sometimes. So don't just watch it because it can affect you. I've seen people not sleeping because they've heard someone gossiping about them. It can affect your mental health. It's a serious thing. It is bullying. Even gossip on emails can be bullying as well. So I would say, as a colleague, take as much evidence as you can, or get someone else to witness it. So they are your evidence as well. And then you can take it further and speak to your line manager or speak to someone, because you don't want to affect your mental health because someone is gossiping about you. It's not acceptable behavior in the workplace. It can be toxic. And so the moment you witness it, if you can't be confident enough to approach the person, speak to your line manager or raise it with someone else. And then I think he's got part B of that question where he's talking about a line manager who's taking up any work that has an incentive to it. What should you do with such type of an environment? Again, this type of a manager, I think the best way you can do is, first of all, and I strongly encourage that, have a meeting with them on one-to-one and just say, look, this isn't right. I'm not happy with this. Can we resolve it? Because they're taking all the work, that they're making money for themselves. They're denying those opportunities to their juniors, and it's not right. Clearly, it's not making you happy. So I would book a one-to-one and have a conversation with them. They might just say, well, look, I'm sorry, it won't happen again. It may be resolved at that stage. And then at least you've tried. If not resolved, then again, I would go to their manager, if you like, manager above, but speak up. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing that and for tackling the second part of the question as well. Now, I think this issue is actually quite complex because sometimes you do have a manager who doesn't really have a manager above that manager. So he's the overall manager. So there's no one to really report to when you have that scenario. How would you deal with that situation where there's no manager above your manager? And so if your manager doesn't listen, then how do you deal with that? I guess it affects your mental health because at this point in time, you're sick and tired of what's happening at work. But how would you deal with that? Who shall I go for? Jean, I'll come back to you as well. How do you deal with a situation where you've spoken to your manager and they're not taking on board what you have?
Yeah, I guess that scenario could happen. So, for example, you may be working in a shop where the owner of the shop is actually your boss, and maybe they're taking all the tips or whatever incentives that are coming in to themselves. Actually, you can still first of all, speak to them and see if they can resolve it. If not, if it's something that is work related, this is where it becomes tricky. If it's something that you're working and they're not rewarding you, they're not giving you the incentive, i.e. the bonus or commission, that's contractual. So it's stated in your contract that you should be getting that, and you're not getting it. You can go to ACAS if it's in the UK. You can ring ACAS and speak to ACAS about it. They will advise you. Or you can go to Citizens Advice Bureau. So those are the two places I would recommend if you are in the UK anyway. But more than happy for you to speak to your manager first of all. And if it's the owner of that business, still more you can speak to them. If not, go to Citizens Advice Bureau. If not, go to ECAS. Hopefully those two places will be able to resolve the issue for you. Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing that. There's a comment here as well. Did anyone have anything else to add regarding that scenario? Mavis? Okay, go ahead.
I actually have a recent personal experience on that, which where my employer, my boss, he's taking advantage of us, our welfare. And so basically how we tackled this as a team so we teamed up all together, all the employee, all the managers. We found out what's the problem there and tried to set up a meeting with our employer to see if there is anything that we can actually help them, my employer, if they are experiencing anything in life that they had to deal with stuff in this way. So it really depends on different situations and do what's best for you and for the other employees.
Thank you very much for sharing that, Mavis. Natalie, any comments?
Yeah, I would say, yeah, definitely. Yeah, if you can all as a group, speak to the boss. Yeah, I mean, I've worked in small organizations. I know exactly how that feels. But you know, if it gets to it, you know, if it's in certain industries, I have been in a union at different points in my working life, so I was able to get advice from them, or I was able to go to the Citizens Advice Bureau. So I have done those things myself as well in the past. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much for sharing. And you've actually touched on something that Jean touched on. So in the UK, we have ACAS and then Citizens Advice Bureau. But Natalie just mentioned a union. So hopefully, if you're outside of the UK, there should be a union for whatever industry you work in. So if you're a teacher, hopefully there's a teachers union that you can go to. If you're someone who works in the market, there's a marketplace or market merchants union. So do look out for communities as such within your field and start to look for them now so that you can, you have a fallback on when hopefully you won't go through any challenges, but you have an idea of who to go to when you have challenges. So thank you very much, everyone, for sharing that. And Christine put a question in the chat. She says, I work for a company that does not have a designated HR personnel due to the small size of the company. Are there any free HR resources to make use of that incorporate mental health and employee well-being? So yes, what we mentioned before, some organizations or companies don't have HR departments. Are there any resources that they can turn to for assistance? Jean, if you could answer this question, please.
Sure. So there are so many mental health charities, by the way, that can offer services for free. And I think Mavis might touch on that as well. One of them is Mind. So Mind, they've got so many resources. They're happy to offer most of those to small businesses free of charge. And the same ACAS as well, which we spoke about. ACAS do train small businesses on mental health and other issues as well. So as a owner of a small company, or if you are an employee there, you can reach out straight to Mind or straight to ACAS. They'll be happy to support you. There are so many Samaritans, there's so many charities at the moment that are looking at mental health seriously to support small businesses. Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing that. So charities are a good option as well for support and resources. So Mind, Samaritans, if you do a search for them, you should find some. There's also Mental Health UK. That's if you're based in the UK. I suppose I'll have to find a resource for people who are international, a good resource for international HR charity or something of that sort. That's a very good something to look for. So I'll find the resource and post it on our social media. Mavis, anything else you want to add?
Yeah, for sure. So I personally work for 2 charities in the UK. So one is Body and Soul, which I've recently started engaging in their activities. And then the other is called Rethink Mental Illness, where I do free mental health workshops for university students. And I guess how it works is really about government funding, and I'm sure there will be similar programs around that provide free mental health workshops for workplaces, and right.
Thank you very much, Mavis. Okay, let's take go back to this previous question asked by Christine, and I think everyone's going to have a go answering this question. So we've tackled this in a little bit, but I think we can go a little bit deeper. So she says, what practical steps? Let me put it here. Oh, I can do that. Yes. What practical steps can employees suggest in the workplace or employers have in place in the job to promote mental health? For example, physical exercise, team fun activities, or social periodic mental health counseling. So what things have employees or employers put in place in the workplace? So from your experiences, I'll start with you, Natalie. You mentioned a few coffee, something.
Yeah, in the depending, on where I've worked, people have got together to have their own socials. Sometimes they'd have socials, we'd have discussions without managers present, just so that people could vent and then do some activities, bring things in, bring and share, a lot of cooking meals from different cultures, and you'd come in and share that, and baking cakes, especially coffee mornings and things like that, bake cakes, and selling what you've baked and giving the money to charity. So we did a lot of different activities, and decorating the office, and and also organising socials in the evening and stuff like that. And it really does help. It does help with the mental health and more of a rounded, balanced view of work, not just. And you get that appreciation as well. I've also worked in different companies where the employers take you out for lunch. I've had managers come up with that amongst themselves, so they take you out once a month, or they'll organise a team day. So it all helps. It all helps.
Fantastic. Good. So I believe if your workplace is not doing that, if you're on this live and your workplace is not doing that, maybe you can suggest it to your line manager or your managers to say it would be good to have some kind of team bonding activities or mental health, based bonding, something to just outside of work. We want to have something to do. So that's an idea as well. There's another question here. Sorry. Mavis, anything else you want to add?
Yeah, for sure. So I'd say team building activities are definitely one of the best ways to promote mental health in the workplace. It doesn't necessarily have to be a mental health workshop, anything explicitly related to mental health. That's because so before I've done a research with an organizational psychologist, and so we collected some data, and then it was based on a UK technology company where we have tried to examine how relationship maintenance behaviors impact their mental health and work performance. And we found that in those 132 workers, the more they engaged in relationship maintenance behaviors, no matter it's in the workplace or personal relationships, that has significantly increased their workplace satisfaction, well-being, everything. So I would say bonding and being able to engage with your coworkers in a different way might be a great way.
Very much for sharing that, Mavis. So bonding within the team. Anything else to add, Jean?
Just to add on, currently majority of our workforce are working from home. So we created like virtual coffee rooms where on your break time, you can just log on and post a question or talk to someone. There's always people there that you can log on and talk to. We also do a lot of competitions around, for example, a 10-mile walk a week. So if you clock 10 miles, you get celebrated. Last month, we were looking at random act of kindness where you just send a thank you or well done or whatever nice message to someone for doing something, just appreciate them. And so, yeah, lots of activities do happen in the workplace anyway, even though some people are working from home. We have to find ways of engaging with those as well. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. And just to add to that as well, in my previous one of my previous jobs, Wednesdays used to be team social. So we closed work early on a Wednesday about 2:00, and from 2 to whenever it was just a team activity. So we play charades or even baking. You know, someone would kind of tell us to get these ingredients, and we'll kind of all bake. Instructions will be said, and we'll just bake at the same time. So just having a day when it kind of close work early and focus on just bonding as a team and not doing anything regarding work was really, really good, and strengthen the team as well. And as you mentioned, random acts of kindness. So in one of my teaching roles, we would within that department, we would send messages to someone in the department who we had seen really fantastic work from. So you just write on a post-it note and put it on the person's desk, and the next morning when they come, they see this really lovely message from their colleagues saying how they had learned from them. Like, you did this with this student, and I really learned from you, and I'd love to know how you do it. And it's just really nice, and it really enforces, really boost the person rather than everything coming from the line manager. It's good to know that their work actually influences their colleagues as well. So that's also something that can be implemented without your manager. So if you don't have to ask your manager to give a compliment to your colleague. The more you do it, you're actually setting examples, and before you know it, it could be something that the whole team will suggest to the managers to say, "Oh, Christine started this thing at I think we can actually take it on board as something that the company does." So I would say initiate things as well on your own, and then see how they go. So for us, they're useful things, and maybe speak to someone else who also feels the same way and do it together. If you're too shy to start it on your own, speak to someone and then do it together. So that's just my little 2 cents there. So we are towards the end of our session, but we have a comment here from Non-Mills, and she says, "Thank you very much for this session. It's been very, very impactful." So thank you all to our panelists. And a comment from Christine as well. So ACAS, Mind, and Samaritans are good resources, charities that you can use. Okay, not charities. ACAS is not a charity, but yeah, it's an organization. And then my final question to all of you, I think we're all going to have a go at this question, is what do you do? What do you do personally to manage your mental health? So what do you do personally to manage your mental health? Not the things you ask your clients to do, but what do you do yourself to manage your mental health? So I'll start with Natalie.
Yeah, I I do meditation. I've been meditating for many years now, and it's helped me through some very tough times. And prayer as well helps me. And then I like to get moving. I do my yoga and I go out walking and get into nature. I walk for miles. It really, really helps me. And getting early nights as well. Trying to keep
Sleeping.
with my sleep, yeah, and making sure I've got enough sleep. That really helps as well.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. Mavis.
Right. I do a lot of mindfulness, and I want to show you this one, which is my gratefulness journal, where I count my blessings, things that I'm grateful for, so that I feel more centered, present, and I enjoy every second of my life and making the most of it.
Wow. Okay. It's very nice. Any coloring as well? Do you do any kind of art as well? I can see there's an artwork in the background.
Oh,
Is
so
that you
that's
as well?
actually a print that I got from an art fair. I didn't do this.
Okay. I
But
thought it was you.
I would love to share you my artwork, but it's not around. Yeah, it's in
Okay. But
my
you
other
do
room.
art as well.
Yeah. Therapeutic
Okay.
art.
Okay. That's good. And Jean.
So in my case, I manage my mental health by going to the gym. I love the gym so much. I could go every day if I had the time and the energy. And also I love music. When you listen to music, it takes your mind away from things. But also as a Christian, I also pray. So whenever I'm so much pressured, I pray, and it does help. And it's true and it's real. It does help. For those that are believers, I would encourage them to pray as well. And those are the three that I go to. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so I can see that there's the physical actually affects our, our mental health. So very important that we do things which actually boost our mental health and know what your favorite things are. So that's something I'll encourage everyone to have a list of your favorite things. And I guess for myself as well, I do pray. But when I feel overwhelmed, I do take some time out to reflect. So I don't lock myself in the room, but I do go to a place and I ask myself, what's the root of this problem? What's the root of how I'm feeling? And I try to get to the bottom of the reason why I feel the way I feel. And before I know it, I feel like, oh, I had 10 problems, but it's actually just one problem I'm dealing with. So I try to, I pray about that one problem, and then before I know it, I have a solution to that one problem, and all the 10 problems I thought I was dealing with just vanishes. So knowing yourself really does help, and interacting with yourself does help. Yes, so it's been an amazing session. And I would say a huge thank you to all our panelists, Natalie, Mavis, Jean. It's been great having you. We had a great session today, and I hope we can have another one next year, and maybe even not on World Mental Health Day. There's other days that we can have a talk about mental health, not just on the Mental Health Day. Mavis, did you want to add something as well? No. Okay.
No, I was just clapping. Thank you,
Let's actually
everyone.
do a round of applause for each other. So it's been a great session, and thank you to all our visitors and our audience for actually interacting with us, and the questions that you asked were very, 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 very important questions. So thank you all so much for joining us from all over the world. If there are any final words from the panelists, if not, I will end our stream for today. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So, thank you all so much, and see you next year or at the next